Hello and welcome back to LTC Heroes Live by Experience Care. My name is Peter Murphy Lewis. I'm your host today, along with Victoria Arama. We are joined today with Christie Hinrichs. She's the president and CEO of Tabitha Healthcare Services out of Lincoln, Nebraska, and we're close neighbors. I'm in Wichita. Victoria's in South America and Chile. But today we're not talking about geography, although we were just recently, before we hit record, talking about Napa. One thing that all three of us have in common is we like wine. But let's talk about important things that matter in this country, long-term care. Christie, welcome to the program.
Great. Thank you for having me.
Christie, I'm going to get things rolling, and I want to hear about how you got into long-term care. I've looked through your resume. You have a lot of leadership. Both Victoria and I have watched your TED Talk, and I see that you've also worked in acute care. Tell me your long-term care initiation story. Who threw you in the pool? Who threw you in the deep end? And what was your first day like?
Yeah, by accident. The short answer is by accident, right? So the truth is I wanted to be a probation officer, and that has, maybe they're more similar than I even knew, who knows? But I studied social work with my undergrad, and while I had done some work in a nursing home in my small town growing up, it wasn't on my radar as a career path that I wanted to take. I really did think I wanted to be on the criminal justice side of things. But the truth is, like many new graduates, I needed work. And Tabitha happened to be looking for a hospice social worker. And so that was my first introduction into healthcare as a grown-up, was starting at Tabitha many moons ago as a hospice social worker. And, then you get here and you get stuck because you fall in love with it. And my core values matched up with the values of the work that we do here, and I've been given a lot of opportunities, and I'm grateful for those opportunities. And I've grown a lot, and I've seen the healthcare world grow a lot. I've seen some things that excite me, and I've seen some things that disappoint me. But I also feel like I have an opportunity to make a difference, and that's really important.
That's impressive. How you started with Tabitha and now you're still there with the organization. It's very inspiring. What were the things that made you fall in love with the industry? You said that there were some things that you just got in there and stuck there because you just fell in love with.
Yeah, I think, early on when I was closer to patient care, certainly you could see that you make a difference. I truly believe that I'm called to do this work. I've often said my calling is to lead and inspire others to make a difference through faith and love. And so working at Tabitha gave me the opportunity to do all of those things, to inspire others, to work in a faith-filled environment, and to be loving and caring, and to receive that back from those that we both serve and work with. So it was easy to fall in love because Tabitha creates such a wonderful environment where they have always lived out their mission. And the mission here has always been deeply rooted in faith and love. And I did leave for a period of time, and mostly because it was still in that growing up phase where I was a little bit stuck still, and I want to be a probation officer. Mostly I don't know what I want to be when I grow up. And so I left, and I did some work in the acute care world, and I worked for a for-profit agency. And, not that either of those are bad, but I found out that neither of those were for me. And so finding my way back eventually to Tabitha, again, not really thinking I would ever return to a place that secondhand didn't feel right either. But it has been a wonderful journey. And the more I'm here, the more I fall in love with it. Matching core values is really, really important. And I feel like I get to live out my own personal core values every day in the work that I do. But more importantly, the people that I work with, they really are heroes. And, I get to be inspired by their work every day. I get the phone calls from happy customers who tell me how great my team members are and what kind of an impact that they have made in their lives. To watch those relationships just bloom and flourish is, how can you not love that?
Yeah. If I would ask anybody on your team or your coworkers how they would describe you as a leader and your leadership style, what do you think they would say?
It's funny that you asked that, because they celebrated one of my work anniversaries by telling me what those words were. So it was fun to kind of hear a few of them. One of them I hear often, inspiring. Effervescent was a fun one that I hadn't heard before. Kick ass. I hope it's okay to say that on the show.
Love that.
But very transparent, passionate, and honest. If I come to work every day, I show up as I am, and I love to lead, and I love to lead in this work. I love to work hard. I would say many would say to you, courage is what they see in me. I have led through a lot of fires, and they have been willing to follow through right behind me, because they trust in me, and they trust that I'll be a courageous leader and take them to paths that, the path getting there might not be easy, but the end is worth getting, the path that it took us to get there.
For sure. And talking about team and work environment, I know that Tabitha was recently honored in Lincoln's Choice Awards. So congratulations.
Thank you.
On the best place to work in work environment. So what is unique about Tabitha that makes it such a good place to work with, that makes their team so motivated and passionate about what they do?
Well, thank you for asking, because it's probably the thing I'm most proud of is our culture here at Tabitha. And it hasn't always been that way, right? Like, making sure that you have a great work culture takes a lot of work. It takes an investment of money. It takes an investment of time. It takes making sure you have the right people on board. It takes making sure you take action when you have the wrong people on board very quickly. And it ebbs and flows. So we're not always great. I have often said to people, at the end of the day, we are people caring for people. And that's really hard to do because all of us have bad days. But in our work, we don't really get to have bad days, at least not outside of a door. You can come behind my door, have a bad day, but you go out of it and then it's a great day. We have built a culture around a set of core values. And what we have done is made sure that everybody knows what those core values are. And they know what it looks like and sounds like to live out those core values. So we do a lot of education and teaching around that, coaching around that. Our performance evaluations, for lack of a better word, are built around that. But our culture we refer to as live to care, and it's love your job. Invite optimism, vision, success, and embrace our purpose. So, you know what you're being asked to do when you join our team. And I have also often said that if we get it wrong, you will stick out like a sore thumb, and you don't want to stick out like a sore thumb here. I've also been accused of running a cult, and I take that as a compliment, because it means that we're picking the right people to be a part of the work that we love.
Christie, I have a question about the values. I like talking about values. Victoria and I are backed by an EHR company, Experience Care, that sponsors the podcast. And one of the values is about being reliable. And I always think that our marketing team, we have kind of a secret value that not everyone knows, which is be goofy 7 days a week. If you had to throw in an extra value that might not be on your website, what do you think it would be, and what excites you about that?
Oh, gosh. Well, I'm just going to tell you that achievement is, it doesn't sound as fun as yours, but we do have a lot of fun. But I am surrounded by serious achievers. I mean, this is a group of people who this is a group of people who are going to do everything in their power to get there. So I would say achieving, just hardcore achieving, is probably one of our unwritten core values.
Thanks.
So going back to what Peter was saying, we both saw your TED Talk earlier before we started this live, and we both, I think it's inspiring how you talk about ageism and elders. And I just wanted to ask you, you mentioned something that stood out to me right away. It's the disruption of the system being healthcare. Would you mind talking a little bit about that with our audience and kind of explain what you mean by disruption of the system?
Sure. So my TED Talk we referred to as Blank Page. That's what we ultimately titled it. And it was the only visual that I could provide for people to try and remember, always remember that at the end of the day, going back to we're people caring for people. So in our world, the system gets us to the point where we're processing referrals, as an example, or we're talking about diagnoses, or we talk about people as a room number. And so as soon as you take the face off of something, then the system just takes its happy place and runs like a system runs. And so, part of being disruptive in the system is saying it's not okay. We're not making donuts, right? We're caring for people. And if we don't act differently when we show up to work because we take that role so seriously, then the system will overrule. And if the system is going to overrule, we might as well just completely turn over the work that we do to robots or anything else that doesn't have to have a caring heart, doesn't have to have a caring hand or the ability to extend a hug, doesn't have to have a listening ear that actually cares and does something with what they hear. The truth is, more than ever, older adults are just ageism is a major issue in our society. And so Blank Page forces you to literally lay a piece of paper that has nothing on it between you and the older adult in which you are blessed to have the opportunity to come to know for whatever reason, and let them tell you their story to this point. And then if they could write the rest of their story in the way that they wanted it to read, what would it read like? And if we knew some of that ahead of time, we could get in front of the system. We could block and tackle the system. We could guide the system in a direction that actually supported those last chapters, whether it's 20 more chapters you've got left or whether it's just one chapter. But if we don't take the time to do that, and if we don't lead that in our world, who will? Who is going to be courageous enough to say enough is enough? Like, we're caring for people, the people who've served their whole lives for us to live this life that we live today.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And thinking about like practical things that you do at Tabitha that highlights that blank page, do you have any specific examples of the way you guys work with your residents or your day-to-day operations that would reflect that disruption of system?
Yeah, so a couple of the things that I mentioned, number one, I don't want to hear room 320 needs water. I want to know that Evelyn needs water. I don't want to hear that, our liver cancer person needs some additional whatever. If we do not put faces on people, we're not caring for people. We're caring for a disease, or we're caring for a task, or whatever it is. But people have names, and then names have faces. And so that's one of the things that we try to keep in front of people constantly as a reminder of that. And that keeps it alive. That really does keep it alive. And we have to be good listeners. So, we are set up in healthcare to be problem solvers. And sometimes there's not a problem to be solved, or it's already been solved if we were just listening more carefully. So being good listeners is a big part of what we teach as well.
Christie, I have a question about the part that you mentioned, story, like develop the story and understand the story of your resident. When I was doing my clinicals to become a CNA, the story that I was most attracted to, and I didn't pick up on this right away, but now reflecting on it, after the fact, the story that I was most interested was two individuals who had severe dementia. They couldn't interact, they couldn't communicate. And I was very, very interested in understanding their story. And I would bring up their pictures, I would pull pictures and show it to them, and I would get reactions from them, visceral reactions from them. And then I would ask other nurses who knew them, their family members, and those stood out with me. And over time, I realized I was paying back to the caregivers who took care of my grandparents who had dementia.
Yeah.
What are the stories that have stood out to you in your work when you're on the floor? What's the person that you are attracted to, or something that stays in your mind like, this will be with me forever and I'm proud of this?
Yeah. Well, so one of the things that we're doing at Tabitha right now is we're building the first ever intergenerational community. And we'll have adults, independent adults over 65 living with college age students who will be primarily nursing students or health science students, right? So it sounds like it could be crazy, but it's going to be crazy good. And when we made the decision to do this, one of the things that I made the decision about right away was that I would need a group of older adults to be my advisors throughout this entire process. So one of my advisors is 99, and his name is Dick. And so Dick has offered a lot of advice, but so much of it has been based on his life experiences. And so, for example, he, one of the things we wanted to address through this project was the epidemic of loneliness. And so he's really vulnerable with me about how lonely, even though he lives in one of our communities and he has interaction every day, but he says talking with other 95-year-olds is not stimulating to him. And so he feels really lonely. And so those are things that I've taken to heart. One of my other advisors was an 85-year-old woman, and she was very vibrant. I have known her for a very long time. Her husband used to be on my board of directors. They've been very engaged and supportive of Tabitha. And she could run circles around me. She was just full of enthusiasm. Her husband died suddenly about a year ago. And so I wanted to engage her in meaningful work, right? Something that would really give her purpose. And so she helped us pick out the carpet, and she helped us, make so many key decisions that we wouldn't have thought of without her. And the story, I am getting to the point, the story that I'll never forget, that's the last chapter, is Sharon died suddenly. She was diagnosed with a terminal diagnosis, and she died within about a 3-week period of time. And so I didn't get to see her in her last weeks because she wasn't healthy enough. But I talked to her by phone and I said, Sharon, I'm so sad. I'm so sorry. And she said, me too. I was really loving life. So, that's a part of a bigger story that's the last sentence of the chapter of a book that I'll never forget. Never forget.
Wow. That's beautiful. So going to the negative perception of ageism in our societies, because it's everywhere around the world, whether you're in Chile or in America, it's everywhere. And I'm still very young, and I know with people around me, like when they talk about aging and growing old, it's always bad. It's always something that means like, oh, you're not going to be able to do these things when you grow old. You're not going to be able to do the thing the same way you're doing now. So I kind of want to talk to you and ask you, as an activist around this, what do you think our society needs either to understand or do to change that perception?
I think we have to reframe aging, right? So one of the things that I say, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart, is I really love getting older, because with getting older is also getting wiser, right? The only way you can get wisdom is by growing old. Even though there are a lot of young people who think they're very wise, and they might be very smart, wisdom really is something that you only gain as you grow older. And so the way that we have been positioning our battle against ageism, our battle against loneliness and experiencing that, is the transfer of wisdom, mutual transfer of knowledge and information, intentional neighboring. But wisdom is at the heart of all of that. So it goes back to, what are the stories that they need to have an opportunity to tell that nobody's asked because no one has had the patience or interest in listening to, that reveals a whole horde of this seeing into a heart and a soul that we would otherwise have never been able to unravel or expose. And then that leads us to knowing, how else do we fight on their behalf? But part of it is, instead of thinking of it as needing to fight on their behalf is putting them at the battle lines with us, right? So that's what, I philosophically, the last couple of years, again, this goes back to the courage bone. We have an annual fundraiser, and 2 years ago, it was probably the most depressing speech anyone's ever given, because I attacked ageism. And I just called out everyone in the room and said, we all are, we all walk around and honk at a person that's driving too slow or walking too slow. We've all done it, including me. And we all have to own it and think differently. And then this last year, I brought 5 70 to 90-year-olds up to the front and let them tell their story about how they're made to feel in their aging journey. So I think just putting it out there and putting it in front of people, I will tell you, we've gotten great responses. Now, only if you remember a few days to be different, and watch your language, or treat an older person different, or a few weeks or a few months, it's still progress. It's still progress.
Christie, one of the things, and this is related to what you said about being around wise individuals, one of the things that I feel like our industry could do better at with our staffing crisis that we're going through is explaining the amazing intangibles, the positive intangibles that come along with working in this industry. For me, one of the obvious ones, and I'm a huge fan of the book, 5 Languages of Love. Have you ever read the book, 5 Languages of Love?
I have.
One of my weak languages is acts of service. And my father and my wife are amazing. So working as a CNA, I get to fine tune that muscle of showing acts of service. And the second thing is, and I feel it's like, if you like to go to the gym, wouldn't you feel good? It's the exact same thing. You get to serve someone else. And the second thing is close to what you said, is being around wise individuals. I generally find that probably 50% of my friends are 10 years older than myself. Do you agree that we could explain this intangible better? Do you have any, I know I'm putting you on the spot, but are there any off the cuff ways that we could tell a 22-year-old single mom who potentially might be a CNA that there's a lot to learn from a 72-year-old grandmother who has a lot of story? I know that was long-winded and I'm putting you on the spot. Do you think we could do better?
We can definitely do better, and I'll tell you how we're attempting to do it. And again, I wish that our touch could be broader and just like hit thousands and thousands and thousands of people at one time. But we're working with 1s and 2s, right? And that's the best we can do for right now. So you do the best you can until you can do better. So we're using our intergenerational living for exactly what you just said. So first of all, it's a trick with the nursing students. They all think they want to be like OB or surgery or ER nurses. That's what every nurse goes to school for, I swear. But when we have them living with older adults, they're going to realize, like, these people are super cool. Maybe I want to go into this line of nursing instead. So that's a trick. And then we also want to, with the older adults who live there, many I suspect will be retired nurses or retired housekeepers or whatever. We're really going to focus on reverse retirement and help them see how they can come back into the workforce and deliver value so that they can be their own voices, improving what they bring back. Even though they thought retirement was great, they miss, again, the opportunity to teach other young people. So they may not be anxious to go back to a 12-hour shift on a floor, but I can guarantee you I will find something for them to do to give them exposure to the young people who can benefit from learning from them, but also to give them incredible purpose, which is very uplifting. So that's one of the things that we're doing.
I love it. And given that I'm only about 5 hours away from you, can I come up and visit that program at some point and interview your team?
We would love for that. We broke ground a couple of weeks ago, and we're set to open next fall. So anytime in between there or after, yes.
I would love to. And a small tangent, since the three of us have already been speaking before we hit go live, and I can feel that there's some good friendly energy that we would get along. I think you'll appreciate this. I'm going to interview a gentleman who is a pilot, and he's a long-term care facility owner, and he flies the elderly, specifically veterans, and flies around the country. And I'm obviously going to go do that. So I thought you would appreciate that and think that's cool.
We've had our veterans in those flights, and they are amazing days. They are amazing days for those older adults. They're amazing days for the adult children, and they're really amazing days for our team members as well.
Well, thank you for letting me go down the tangent. Christie, I want to ask you a question about Tabitha's size or your geographic location or the demographics. And I don't really know how to phrase the question, so I'm going to kind of throw it out there and let you run with it. Is there anything that's unique about your service, your product, about your infrastructure that makes it challenging for you to run the organization? Like either everyone's moving to home health or you have 5 new competitors. And is there anything unique about you all that makes it extra special for opportunity for growth so that your residents fall in love with you and your residents' families fall in love with you? I guess a challenge and a strength is kind of what I'm asking you.
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, our home base is Lincoln, Nebraska, which is, one of the urban, if you call any place in Nebraska urban, Lincoln is considered one of the urban areas. But we're in about 26 or so communities or counties, So most of the work that we do is actually in rural America. Which means we're spaced out, and one visit to get to could take an hour and a half one direction. But we're really committed to rural Nebraska. First of all, I grew up in a rural community. Most of Nebraska is rural, and we don't want to see healthcare options not be available in rural areas. So Tabitha does have the full continuum of services. So we have as much home care and hospice that is home-based as we do any bricks and mortar solutions. And we have done that intentionally, again, in part because we know that's where people want to stay if possible, but also it gives us greater flexibility with staff and staffing, and it definitely allows us to be more resourceful in the rural communities. So the negative is, though, the stereotype, no matter, as soon as you hear the word Tabitha, we're 136 years old. So people still think old nursing home, and we've got a great, strong brand, but until you really need to know and understand the work that we do, if you've been around for a while, you automatically think this sort of old nursing home concept. And again, just such a negative connotation. So one of the opportunities that we have is to shift and pivot and be agile. So as like you mentioned, Peter, you're aware of this, there is a shift to home care. We've benefited from that. We were prepared for that. We saw that coming. We saw long-term care decreasing. We were one of the very first to do greenhouse homes for long-term care. So we're pretty good at seeing what's coming and trying to get ahead of that. Our Intergen community, I'm blessed to have a board that believes in taking risks. Because when we decided to build our Intergen community, Sage Living by Tabitha, it was nothing more than a dream Christie had. And I was painting that picture as clearly as I could, but I didn't even have a full image of it yet. And so for them to say yes to that, it was very honestly, in some ways, it was a financial move for us so that we aren't so much dependent on the government, but also because we knew in our heart of hearts that 2 generations would benefit from this. And if we could make that difference without leaving our purpose or abandoning our purpose in any way, that we would begin to change the future. And so whether we are able to do more of these or we just inspire other people to think differently like that, those are the opportunities we're trying to chase down and grab hold of and make become reality.
Wow. So to start wrapping up, if you could go back to meet your younger self, what advice would you give her in terms of the industry, working and being successful in an industry like long-term care, but also as a leader?
Oh, man. I would definitely tell myself to listen more, to take the time to listen. So again, I today know how important that transfer of wisdom is. And that it is worth taking the extra minute or 2 minutes or 3 minutes or 10 minutes I would walk slower. I would be less frustrated when I can't understand. I would have more patience. I would be kind more often. I would extend grace even more than I think we already do a great job at that. But even today with my own dad, I'm realizing I, as a child, didn't really care about his stories because he was like an old guy and he was my dad. And, now I'm like, oh, his story is really interesting and I want to learn more. And lucky for me, I still have the opportunity to do that. But so many people miss that opportunity because we wait too late. From a leadership perspective, it's really similar, actually. Value wisdom. We think we're really bright when we're young, and there are so many young, bright people. Thank God for that. But I have often been asked, how did you become CEO? And taking us back to where we started, I wanted to be a probation officer. That was the highest ambition that I had for my life. And I had no intentions or interest whatsoever in being a CEO. I don't remember even knowing one in the small town where I grew up. And what I would say to you is my whole life, what I've been is curious. I just have always wondered why we do what we do. Is there a way for us to do it better? And I will tell you, be careful what you ask for, because I think I've just always been given more responsibility as a result of me being curious. But I think curiosity, courageousness, and valuing wisdom are some of the greatest pieces of advice that I can give for either the industry and or just leadership and growing up in this world.
Thank you so much, Christie. It's been really, really nice to get to know you and to talk about all these amazing topics with you.
Thank you for having me. It's been a joy.
Christie, I have one rapid fire question that I'm going to ask you before we sign off. It's something that I ask when I go to conventions. Next week, I'm going to Leading Age Georgia convention. And so you're going to be put on the spot, whereas some of them will be warmed up from hearing your answer. But
Okay.
I think you'll be prepared. If you could own one billboard outside of Lincoln, Nebraska, that thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people are going to see over a month, what would the billboard say and why?
Live joyfully, age gratefully. And to be honest, that is our purpose statement. But I love it so much because it actually frames a life of at any age, right? It frames a life at any age. And a lot of people misstate it and they say live gracefully. And I'm like, no, I'm not talking about live gracefully. I'm talking about being glad that you woke up one more day with an opportunity to offer something in this world. And when we don't live joyfully, and many of us don't, because even older people buy into the idea that they're not worth anything, because that's how our society treats them. So when we can begin to tell people and remind people that they're worth something, then they can live their life joyfully and they can age gratefully. They'll be grateful to wake up tomorrow instead of dreading it. And the truth is there's a lot of dread in aging.
That was a wonderful answer. Thank you so much. Look forward to connecting with you and hopefully meeting you in person at one point in Nebraska. Stay in touch and thank you for joining us.
Sounds great. Thanks to